Imagine you're relying on Medicare transportation to get you to a doctor's appointment, only to find out the HOA Karen next door has decided to cancel it without any reason. That's exactly what happened to me, and let me tell you, it was a nightmare that took an unexpected turn. It all started when I received a call from the Medicare transportation service informing me that my ride had been cancelled. Confused and frustrated, I learned that the HOA had somehow interfered with my service. You're probably thinking, how could anyone have the power to do that? Well, it turns out this Karen had a lot more control over the situation than I ever expected. Things escalated quickly. I wasn't about to let her get away with something like this, so I started digging into what was really going on. What I uncovered shocked me, and in the end, it wasn't just a cancelled ride that I had to deal with. The authorities got involved, and the situation went from frustrating to downright chilling. You won't believe what happened next. Was it just a simple mix-up, or was there something darker at play? Stay tuned, because what I uncovered changed everything, and the consequences were far bigger than I ever imagined. To understand how this all happened, I need to take you back a little bit. I live in a quiet, middle-class neighborhood with a strict HOA, but things had always seemed normal. The HOA was your typical group of well-meaning, but overly controlling people, enforcing rules about lawns, garbage bins, and even mailbox colors. I'd never had any issues with them before, but this time, things were different. This Karen, let's call her Carol, had been a problem from the start. She was one of those people who seemed to think that her opinion mattered more than anyone else's, and if something didn't fit her idea of order, she was the first to complain. But I never expected her to go this far. It wasn't just a petty rule violation. She had actually called my Medicare transportation service and made it clear that she didn't think I deserved the ride. I later learned that Carol had connections within the HOA board, and somehow she'd managed to convince them that I was abusing the transportation service, even though I've always used it for medical reasons. The more I dug, the more I realized that Carol wasn't just exercising her power, she was playing some twisted game. But why? And what could she possibly gain from this? That's when I started to piece together a story that had been unfolding under my nose for months. The real shock came when the authorities showed up at my door, and everything changed. But what happened next was beyond anything I could have imagined. The authorities showing up at my door was the first real sign that things were spiraling out of control. I wasn't sure what to think at first. Was this a mistake? Had Carol gone too far? But when I opened the door, it wasn't just a misunderstanding. There were two officers standing there, one of them holding what looked like a case file. They asked me about the transportation service and if I had ever experienced any issues with it. I tried to stay calm, explaining that the service had always been reliable, but lately there had been this strange cancellation, and I was getting the feeling it wasn't a coincidence. The officers didn't say much, but it was clear they were investigating something bigger than I'd realized. What really made my blood run cold was when they mentioned the words elder abuse. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How could this be tied to something so serious? I hadn't done anything wrong, and I was the one being wronged, right? But the officer's questions started to take on a darker tone. Was Carol accusing me of something? Or was there something more sinister going on that I hadn't seen yet? Days passed, and I kept getting strange looks from my neighbors. People who I'd known for years suddenly acted like they were avoiding me. And Carol? She was nowhere to be found, as if she had vanished into thin air. That was when I found out there was more to this story than I could have imagined. The deeper I dug, the more twisted the whole situation became. I began to learn about Carol's past, and the more I found, the more I realized she might be hiding something darker than I could have ever guessed. As the days dragged on, the tension in the neighborhood only grew. People kept whispering behind my back, and I couldn't escape the feeling that something was closing in around me. Carol was still nowhere to be seen, but I couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that she was pulling strings from the shadows, manipulating the situation in ways I couldn't fully understand. I started to ask around, trying to piece together what was really going on with Carol. I spoke to a few of the neighbors who had always been friendly, but their faces changed when I mentioned her name. Some said she'd been acting odd lately, others hinted at things they didn't want to talk about. But the more I dug, the clearer it became. Carol wasn't just a petty HOA board member. She was a master manipulator, someone who knew how to play the system to her advantage, and she had a vendetta against me. I discovered that Carol had been involved in several shady dealings in the past, though nothing concrete had ever been proven. Her connections to the HOA gave her more power than anyone realized, but there was something bigger at play, something that I was only beginning to understand. Then, one evening, I received a message from an anonymous source, someone who claimed to know the truth about Carol's actions. The message warned me that if I didn't back off, I would be in even deeper trouble than I could imagine. My heart raced as I realized that Carol had more on her plate than just petty HOA disputes. There was something much darker beneath the surface, and I was about to uncover it. I knew I was getting too close to the truth, but I couldn't stop now. I had to keep pushing, even if it meant risking everything. Because the closer I got, the more it became clear. Carol's twisted game was about to come to a head, and I was going to be caught in the middle of it. The more I learned, the more dangerous it seemed. I had my suspicions about Carol, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. Just when I thought I was getting closer to unraveling her twisted web, I received another unexpected visit, this time from a lawyer. The lawyer handed me a thick envelope, but before I could even ask what it was about, he started speaking in a low, serious voice. "You need to stop digging into Carol's business," he said. I felt a cold chill run through me, or you're going to regret it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'd never seen this lawyer before. His presence was unsettling. He wasn't just representing Carol, he was representing someone even more powerful. The envelope he gave me contained documents that claimed I was under investigation for elder abuse. The same charge that Carol had been throwing around. It didn't make sense. I was the one being targeted, but here I was, apparently the one being accused. The plot thickened as I skimmed through the papers, only to find that the charges weren't just linked to Carol. They were linked to a group of high-powered individuals who had been part of that HOA's board for years. And some of them were connected to the very medical services I relied on for transportation. My mind was spinning. Was I caught in some kind of conspiracy? Were these people really willing to go this far to silence me? I realized then that the stakes were far higher than I ever anticipated. It wasn't just about a cancelled ride anymore. This was a fight for my freedom. With each passing hour, I could feel the walls closing in, and the question loomed larger than ever. Who could I trust? I needed to act fast before they had the chance to frame me for something I hadn't done. But in a town this small, where everyone seemed to know each other, I knew I couldn't fight this alone. I knew I had to act fast before things got any worse. The lawyer's visit had shaken me to my core, but I wasn't about to let them frame me for something I hadn't done. I spent the next few days meeting with a private investigator, someone who had a reputation for uncovering the truth, no matter how deep it was buried. Together, we followed every lead, piecing together the trail of corruption that had been hiding right under my nose. The more we uncovered, the more I realized just how tangled Carol's web was. It wasn't just her pulling the strings. There were a dozen others involved in what could only be described as a massive scam. They were using the HOA as a front for a series of illegal activities, including manipulating Medicare services and falsifying records to pocket funds meant for vulnerable people. I was a small part of it, but that's what made me a target. Carol and her associates had been trying to silence anyone who could expose them, and I had unknowingly stepped into their crosshairs. We gathered enough evidence to go public, but just as I was about to send it to the authorities, something unexpected happened. Carol finally made her move. She confronted me one last time, trying to intimidate me into backing down. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I had the truth on my side. That's when she did something I never saw coming. She broke down, claiming she was only following orders from someone much higher up, someone with connections far beyond the HOA. She was terrified, and in that moment, I realized the whole thing was even bigger than I thought. I was left with only one choice: take the evidence straight to the authorities myself. The moment I handed over the documents, everything changed. The police raided the HOA offices, and the scandal that followed rocked the entire community. Carol and several others were arrested, but even as justice was being served, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone else was pulling the strings from the shadows. And then, as I was reflecting on everything that had happened, I received one last message from the investigator. It was a simple note with just 2 words: "Watch your back." I still don't know who the real mastermind behind it all is, but one thing's for sure: this is far from over. After the authorities raided the HOA offices, the entire community was left in shock. People who had once been so quick to judge me now found themselves grappling with the truth. The scandal was exposed, and with Carol and her accomplices arrested, it felt like a weight had been lifted. For once, I could breathe easy, knowing that the system was finally working as it should. But even though justice had been served for the most part, there were still questions left unanswered. Who was really behind it all? Who was the true mastermind that Carol had been so afraid of? Despite all the arrests, there were still whispers, rumors that the corruption ran deeper than we could imagine. The private investigator's warning echoed in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't over. In the end, I realized that sometimes the fight isn't just about one person or one issue. It's about standing up when things don't seem right, even when you don't have all the answers. My life may never be the same, but I learned that truth has a way of coming to light, no matter how deeply it's buried. For now, I'm watching my back, keeping my eyes open for whatever comes next, because in a world full of hidden agendas, you can never be too careful.